Karen, you can take it away.
Okay, a special good morning to everybody tuned in and listening in on this live stream. We are here today to talk a little bit more about what we've been calling Caribbean 30 by 30, which is a discussion of the importance and opportunities for the 30 by 30 goal that is being used and being promoted in a number of settings, what the value is for the Caribbean region. And I'm very pleased to have with me today two very important Caribbean leaders to help us go through the discussion. So first of all, my name is McDonald Gayle, and I am the Chief Executive Officer of the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund. And for those who don't know, the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund has been around for 10 years. We're at our 10th anniversary. And indeed, we were set up as part of the 20 by 20 goals. So we have a link to this process of working on conservation goals in the region, which was the original Caribbean Challenge Initiative goal. And we are an umbrella environmental fund that works on sustainable financing opportunities and prospects for the Caribbean region. So we're very pleased to be hosting and to be promoting the Caribbean 30 by 30. And I'm also pleased to be able to have with me to have this discussion two very distinguished Caribbean leaders who can help us with the ideas that go along with the 30 by 30 goals. We have first the CEO of the Caribbean Climate Smart Accelerator, Ms. Racquel Moses. And just very quickly, in terms of an introduction, as the CEO of the Climate Smart Accelerator, Racquel leads the accelerator in delivering its strategy and brings with her nearly 2 decades of business management experience in the Caribbean region. She works with key stakeholders in government and public and private sector in the co-development of the accelerator strategies. And she is driving investment projects across the Caribbean to scale. She's based in Port of Spain, Trinidad, and last year in October, she was appointed as the only UN Global Ambassador for the Caribbean to the UN Conference of the Parties, number 26, that was held in Glasgow. So very happy to have Ms. Moses with us. And I will just go ahead as well and welcome Dr. Didacus Jules, who is the Director General of the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States. He assumed the post in 2014, and he is responsible for driving the regional integration and thrust to a single economic and social space involving the 10 Eastern Caribbean states. And he is by profession an educator, which I actually only learned when I was doing this preparation. So we also want to hear from him the value of 30 by 30 and to that community as well. So I'm going to open up the floor and maybe start with some opening comments from both our panelists, our presenters, to say a little bit about how they think the 30 by 30 goal has been rolling out in the Caribbean. So a kind of status update, but also why they think it is important that it continues to roll out for the region. And I will start with Ms. Moses to begin the discussion. Welcome, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. And I was really hoping that you were going to lead with Dr. Jules, considering that he's been in this far longer than we have and is on our board. However, we're glad from our perspective, we are seeing great desire to pursue 30 by 30. The main challenge that we're seeing governments facing in pursuing the goal is how do they fund it? And that is part of the gap that we want to help governments close. And so if we can have greater ambition and greater requirement to meet this objective, to say, listen, if we can fund it, we will pursue 30 by 30 and make that commitment, then we will help to close those gaps. There are funders who are willing. What we're finding is that the situation of the availability of funding is really complicated. There is a bit of a mismatch between large swaths of funds that are available and the kind of funding that projects like this require. And so we're seeking to sort of close those gaps where we can right size the type of money that's available with the type of money that's required. You know, a loan isn't appropriate for every kind of conservation, but there's endless loan money available. And then how do you secure that loan money, as an example? So we're seeing that mismatch, and we're sort of working through the weeds, trying to connect the dots between the money and the ambition. And so we really want to see more governments reaching out, being willing to take that chance to say, I'm willing to support 30 by 30, provided that I have the ability to fund it. I think that will help us in closing the global finance gap, you know, that was left open by COP26. And then let's bring some innovation to the process. I mean, I know that when people think about making this commitment, you know, when you're standing on the sidelines, it seems as though, okay, well, we make the commitment and we just don't develop on that land, but it's way more complicated than that in making the commitment towards 30 by 30. So let's have that dialogue. Let's figure out what are the gaps that we need to close. Let's figure out how we can use Internet of Things devices and you know, blockchain and satellite imagery as a part of the protection landscape that can reduce the cost as well. So you know, I think if we can be sufficiently ambitious, then we can find the ways to close the gaps that exist.
Thank you. And just to add, you know, the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund comes from that mindset at the time of the Caribbean Challenge Initiative. The idea that, yes, we want to do our 20 by 20 goal, but it must be based and must involve some funding to continue and to continue through. So that's why what you said is very important to moving ahead and making sure that that's a big part of the process. And we have seen the commitment from a number of the developed countries to the idea of funding. And we at CDF and in the region look forward to figuring out how we get those funds on the ground, which of course is always the essential part of those types of announcements. So thank you very much for those words.
Yeah,
Dr.
and there are
Jules,
new instruments, and there are new instruments available. And so new sources of funding as well. You know, we're working with like an intrinsic value instrument that values ecosystem services as an example. And so there are new types of funding that can be brought to bear, but we first need the ambition and we need people to care, because nature needs to regenerate itself for us to protect the biodiversity, among other things.
Thank you so much, Ms. Moses. Dr. Jules, the same question to you. How have you seen the 30 by 30 so far, and your ideas on the next stage for it as we move forward with the goal?
Well, first of all, Karen, I want to thank you and the Island of Innovation and your organization for hosting this, because I think it's vitally important. We have started with the 20 by 20, as you initially stated, and now we are 30 by 30. There's a sense of urgency that needs to be injected in this initiative, because we cannot afford a 40 by 40 because the mathematics works inversely. So the idea is the 30 by 30 target is to provide opportunities for us to, you know, safeguard 30% by 2030. By 2040, we can't reserve 40% because it's going to be much less. So there's an inverse mathematics at work. And I think that speaks to the urgency of the initiative. Also, the fact that we are small island developing states means that we have limited land mass. And therefore, when we talk about biodiversity, not even counting our ocean space, there are huge challenges in ensuring that we have to do this now. Now is the time to do it. Racquel spoke to the importance of funding, and I mean, we're totally on board with that. There is a real requirement for funding, but ultimately, this requires a coalition of support from all actors in that space. There are instruments that are now available that I think needs to be repurposed to be aligned to the 30 by 30 target. So for example, green bonds and institutions like the GGGI have been working with us in the OECS, for example, to develop to get countries accredited and ready to access those sources of financing. The Caribbean Accelerator is another, Climate Smart Accelerator is another grouping that is attempting to do the same, to align us this time with actual funding opportunities, which is vitally important. But I believe that one of the things that we need to do with regard to the funding is to look for innovative opportunities for new blends of all of these approaches to create a more symbiotic approach to tackling this challenge. I'm speaking, for example, of the new buzz thing, the whole metaverse. And just recently at the OECS, we've been having discussions with respect to the national trust in the OECS member states and how they can actually using some seed money from the European Union to begin to look at creative ways of ensuring environmental sustainability by actually raising our own indigenous approaches to financing. So imagine, for example, a pristine area of rainforest reserve that is under serious threat of encroachment because of economic pressures in one of the small islands. And we are able to, using satellite imagery and so on, and satellite pictures of the island to map that area, even segment it, just as one would do if one were doing an ordinary land survey, and to divide it into blocks and have these blocks, have that entire imagery available in the metaverse as areas for sale, but for green conservation. So that I could purchase a portion of, say, 10 acres of rainforest in Nevis. And that I would pay, let's say, $1 million an acre. But I would not I would be purchasing it in the metaverse, but not in its physical format. So that in that way, that money can be used for conservation purposes and even for alternative employment and development purposes in the country. But it means, therefore, that the title I would get would indicate that this is a title to the metaverse version of that landscape, but it helps preserve in perpetuity the physical counterpart for conservation purposes. And then there are all kinds of other permutations. There could be a time limit on that ownership that can require it's like instead of a purchase, a lease arrangement in the metaverse, right, that would then require occasional renewal. So and within the OECS, this whole ambition on the 3030 targets aligns very closely not only to the Sustainable Development Goals of the UN, but also our St. George's Declaration, which is now in its second generation. We were one of the first regional organizations to have an actual declaration on the environment that laid out the principles of sustainable development and sustainable management of our natural resources. So we are fully on board with this, and our role as the OECS Commission is to ensure that all of our member states subscribe to the 3030, not by word, but by deed. Thank you.
That's excellent. Thank you so much. And it's important to point out that the ambition for the 30 by 30 is global. And so this is also a matter of making sure that the Caribbean is part of the bigger picture of what needs to be done for the global goal of 30 by 30. So we remember for the Caribbean Challenge Initiative, each country was aiming for their 20% by 2020. And now we are looking together as a planet as how we do this more effectively. And I think a lot of what you've mentioned, both Racquel and Dr. Jules, really speak to making sure that this is not, this is moving, this is dynamic, this is something that works for the region. And in, of course, the Caribbean region, it is about funding and funding opportunities and what we can do to ensure sustainable funding in terms of conservation. So I think it's a good mix.
Yeah, but Karen, I need to punctuate something, because you see, we had the 20 by 20, 20% conserved by 2020. We're now looking at a 2030 target. If we did not meet 20% by 2020, how can we then be talking about 30% by 2030? Because we have to check that out empirically, but I'm sure the opportunity for meeting that target with the passage of time actually exponentially recedes with what is happening with, environmental incursions and so on, and degradation. So it's vitally important that we really stick to that 30 by 30. I think that's probably our red line to achieve the ambitions that we are talking about here.
And I think your footnote that we can't do 40 by 40 is very real.
No, for sure, for sure.
Yeah, 40 by 40 is not an option. No, I was just saying that, but I thought that 20 by 20 was a good guide because certain countries and certain territories were able to meet that objective. We just need more of the countries to come and territories to come on board now. And we need them to be more deliberate and decisive about making the action. We would have learned a lot in the last, in our ambition towards 2020. And now we need more decisive action. But as Dr. Jules is saying, it's not, it is a race that we have to now stop it in its tracks. We cannot, we don't have another 10 years to then go and say, okay, well, 40 by 40, we'll get it then. Because it becomes more difficult. But I think that the 20 by 20 goal was a good goal because there were territories that met that goal and exceeded it. And that's what we need to build from that strength.
I'm also excited by the discussion on the new vision of protected areas. So this isn't that you're leaving a piece of land that's untouched. It's how do you use the land for some of what we want to see done and some of what we want to see preserved for our various island territories. And I always emphasize our large ocean states. So this is about the waters that surround us and the land that we're building on. But it's not about not touching it. It's about how we make sure that we are doing investments and funding, blended financing, as was mentioned, towards some of the ideas that we want to get done in some of these areas that we do want to make sure that the world can see and observe and showcase the value of what we have in the region. So I think it's important that we consider those types of financing opportunities and that they're long-term. So moving away from grants, donor grants, to what we can do in our own region for the change that we want to see in protected area management. Go ahead, Dr.
Karen, if I may, a couple of critical points you touch on there. One is the importance of us being the change that we want to see, because it's very easy for us as small island development states to point to the big culprits in climate change and require of them that they undertake certain measures and that we ourselves may not be undertaken. So that is critical. And to Racquel's point about the urgency of the fact that some countries have met the 20 by 20, but the importance of spreading it, I think the key to us really realizing that 30 by 30 is not just to focus on the land, but as you pointed out, the sea space, because in the OECS, for example, our seascape is I think about 83 times our land space. So, and in fact, if you look at it, there's an interconnection between what happens on the land and what happens in the sea that cannot be separated. So we now need to take a more holistic and integrated approach to this. The sea offers us tremendous opportunities both for conservation and for more responsible exploitation of the resource. And there are many, many possibilities in how we do this, some of which we are exploring now, and some of which I think are still to be discovered and shaped.
Yes, and CBF is working with OECS, particularly in the area of blue biotrade, which I know you're doing a lot of work on, and also on the wider idea of blue economy financing opportunities as they arise. And again, anything that we're mentioning in terms of finances is perpetual financing mechanisms, as we use the term in the CBF. And as you also mentioned, you working through national entities, so that this is really on the ground work that is working through those national conservation trust funds to show results and make sure the opportunities continue in terms of what needs to be done for financing for conservation.
One last quick point on that.
Sure.
I say one last quick point on that, and that is the importance of us recognizing that when we talk about conservation, we're not just talking about leaving things in an untouched and pristine state while people are hungry, because that has been part of the confusion in the dialogue around this. And I think now all of our political leadership is on board because they recognize that it is impossible to continue to talk about economic development in the old way of just, indiscriminate exploitation of resources that are finite. So there is that paradigm shift. But I think it is still important for us to punctuate that the solutions that are being proposed, particularly by things like the 3030 initiative, have to do with ensuring that we are taking care of lives and livelihoods as well as sustainable and the lives of the earth as well as of the people of the earth while ensuring sustainability. So we are not ditching, ignoring poverty while we preserving nature.
That's right.
So important.
Yes, Racquel, you were going to add something?
No, I was just saying that's so important. And what I loved about Dr. Jules's earlier comments is talking about, the metaverse and being able to utilize that. And how exciting is it that we have an opportunity to take a leadership role on a global stage as to how conservation is funded. And we really need to understand that these opportunities do not come up very often. And yes, we can sit back and point fingers at who's not doing what, but we all have to be accountable and we need to lead by example. So I love the idea of moving towards, let's buy conservation on the metaverse. Let's start it now. And so if there's anybody working for Facebook listening, and including my friends who work at Facebook, we're gonna be hitting you up about how you help us and how you seed that idea of getting people to fund conservation on the metaverse. I mean, we have the first in the region, the first embassy in the metaverse in Barbados. And so, we can build upon those strengths to create new opportunities.
All right, I think that's the perfect note for us to conclude on. I will ask if you all have any concluding comments. From my side, just to say that the idea of the 30 by 30 is, as we've been saying, preserving and demonstrating and valuing what the Caribbean has that we want to keep in terms of our natural resources, while making sure that there is the ability to showcase it in new and exciting ways in terms of investment. And that's what I see the 30 by 30 as. And it's important for us that there is the preservation of what's natural. We know there are some threats, and so we don't want to discount that. But how we manage those threats and how we adapt to them is going to be what's going to be so important, and why the 30 by 30 goal is important as a global goal. I thank you all again. Let me ask for your parting words and thoughts that we can leave with the audience to think about, as some of the countries still think about where they're going with their 30 by 30 decisions. And I will switch it around and now start with Dr. Jules and then go to Ms. Moses.
Well, I think we need to, you mentioned earlier my passion and profession in education, and I think I want to end on that point, because our generational challenge is to halt the slide in the destruction of the earth with the 3030 goals. But one of our responsibilities there is not just to implement and achieve the 30 by 30, but also to look at what is not just the inheritance that we have, the physical inheritance we are passing to the next generation, but what is the psychological, the mindset inheritance. And that mindset inheritance has to be a different way of valuing life and resources and everything. So that's where education comes in vitally important, so that we are starting afresh. We are resetting the button as to humanity's approach to nature, to recognize, as the old Apache saying goes, that we borrow the earth, we inherit the earth from our ancestors, and we borrow it from our children.
Thank you. And Ms. Moses.
Thank you, Racquel is fine. There is so much, and thank you so much for your comments, Dr. Jules. I think maybe doing it the other way around would have worked better. I don't know that I have anything as poignant to say about it, but I will say that this is an opportunity for us. This is an opportunity for leadership. This is an opportunity for great ambition. This is an opportunity for conservation. This is an opportunity for fundraising. If we think about this as a cost center, we will lose. We have to think about the opportunity for biodiversity, the opportunity for leadership, the opportunity for doing things differently, and the opportunity to get ahead of where we are. And so the things that we are contemplating in 30 by 30 have to be done. It's not an option. And so rather than sit back and wait for someone else to do what we know needs to be done for our own survival and protection, let us be that change that we want to see, you know, as we say so often, and as Dr. Jules mentioned earlier, there is innovation to be had. There are new solutions that will come out of this, and there are new businesses to be formed as a result of this. And if we just sit back, we will miss yet another chance to do something absolutely groundbreaking and amazing. So we have to do this now. We cannot continue to wait.
Thank you very much. Very, very great words to end on. Thank you both for joining me for the discussion today. For any further information on the 30 by 30 process and indeed the Caribbean's involvement, go to Caribbean 30x30, so Caribbean30x30.org, and you will see the work that we are doing together as Caribbean leaders on reaching the 30 by 30 goals. Thank you all.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thanks.